way. Okay. Being that it's says to be Tshuva, and hopefully we're all focusing on the theme of Tshuva and looking at the Baruch and seeing what we do to do better stuff. We invited a special speaker, special in terms of the friend of mine, former Rabbi, currently the Rav of probably one of the biggest schools in the United States. Yeah? So I implore you, I ask all of you, which I'm sure with them anyway, to open your ears, tune in, and open your heart. I ask you.
First of all, there's just over 3 minutes. It's a wonderful opportunity every time I get invited to Rambam, given my connection to Rambam. When I left Smicha, I started at the yeshiva and I was there from 95 till 2003. But really to come into this new building and almost like Chanukah's Abayis for me, to be able to see, I'm so happy for Rabbi Friedman, because I know this has been a dream for many, many, many years to have your own building, and I know what Rabbi Friedman, I don't know if the boys, I don't know if the Talmidim fully understand how much Rabbi Friedman has given of his life. I know, I can't do that, but Masif the Rama. It's only because this is the first time, we won't do this in future years, but really to see this building and the blood, sweat, and tears that Rabbi Friedman has put in on behalf of the Talmidim for all these years. And it's just tremendous. And you're one of my mentors to show me, and I was very young, in terms of literally giving your entire being for the club and for the Talmidim. And I always say in my shul, the most special thing for me in the shul, one of the most special things is that I have groups of shul members who normally refer to their rabbi as rabbi, and they call me Rebbe. And that's the most treasured thing because there's Talmidim. And so Mitzvah, one day, you, the Talmidim here, will have a sense of awareness of what everything that is given to you and all opportunities. And I just want to share a thought that I shared yesterday with my shul, discussing what on the surface is a interesting Rambam, an interesting idea that the Rambam shares with regards to the laws of Tshuva. We know it's Aser Shmei Tshuva. We only have a few days left. We haven't really given thought to Tshuva. Tomorrow's already Erev Yom Kippur. Tomorrow and then Tuesday's Erev Yom Kippur, so we have 3 days. And as we're getting ready, the Rambam makes a statement. But to appreciate the Rambam statement, before we even do the Rambam statement, Rabbi Friedman just took me to the Holocaust room and showed me what's going to be, and I know the passion that Rabbi Friedman has and the Sifta has for the remembrance of the Shoah. So this is actually a story, a book that was written, published recently, and it's not really directly the Shoah in terms of what was occurring in Europe. It actually tells a story. It's called Axelrod. And Axelrod was a historical book that was written by this Leah Garrett. She's director of Jewish Studies in Hunter College. And what was Axelrod? Axelrod was that there were many young men during the war, in the early part of the war years, from Germany and Austria, that ran away, left their families, they were young, and they left their families and they went to England. And when England, at the outbreak of the war, because they were German and Austrian citizens, the British took them from whatever their lives were and put them in internment camps, did not treat them so well. Certainly they were not allowed to participate in the British Army whatsoever. So eventually though, they created this pioneer corps where they were still not allowed to fight, but they could join up, and that would get them at least out of these camps that were horrible camps. They put these people even in Australia, in the middle of the desert, with very harsh conditions, not like a concentration camp, but still very, very difficult conditions. So many of them took advantage of what was called this Pioneer Corps. And they would just dig, ditches and do menial labor. It was against the law in Britain for any, what they called an alien, to be involved in holding a weapon and fighting on behalf of Britain. But no less than Winston Churchill came up with the idea that he was going to have, that he was going to use these German and Austrian Jews as part of a commando group. It was about 80 to 120, and they would be selected from many of them. And knowing that they're familiar with the language and they know how to operate, they would be given the skills to be able to be a crack military group, a commando group that even the echelon of the British military did not know. And he gave them the name X-Troop. And in the book, it states, and it gives over, that when they were called by their captain, his name was Hilton Jones, Captain Hilton Jones, he assembled them in the room, and he said to them, you have 15 minutes. You have 15 minutes. It says 15 minutes for what? It says, as each of you, if you're captured, and you have a Jewish name, and you have a Jewish background, there's only one thing that's going to happen. You know what's going to happen? You're going to be dead on the spot. They'll kill you right there. You will not be a prisoner of war. You will be shot and killed. And so, you have to come up with your own British name and your own British cover story. You can imagine. Here are these people. The only thing, they left their families, they left their homes, they left everything that was familiar to them. The only thing they really had was their name. And they had to give up their name. They had to give up their identity. That's extra. Comes along the Rambam. And the Rambam talks about the following. He says that it's the derech of tshuva, that the way of doing tshuva, what are one of the ways of doing tshuva? So I'm sure like this, throw it out here. Just give me some quick ones. What do you think are ways of doing tshuva? What? Daven, tefillah, tzedakah, fasting, right? What isn't on your list, and it's understandably so, but the Rambam puts it on his list, is that Umeshana Shmo, I should change my name, Klomar, as if to say, Ani Acher, I am someone different, Ve'eno oso ish sha'osa ma'asim. I am someone else, Ani Acher, I am someone else, and I am not that person who did that act. Whatever that act is, I'm not that person who did that act. Now that Rambam, if it has two questions on the Rambam. The first question is, where did the Rambam get this idea? Where did the Rambam get this idea? You have to change your name. And secondly, what is the idea of saying Klomar Ani Acher? The Rambam could have just said, B'shana Shmo, Ve'eno Oso Ish. What's the Klomar Ani Acher? Okay, two questions. Where did the Rambam get this, and what exactly does he mean when he says Mishana Shmo? And the second is, what's this phrase of Klomar, as if to say, Ani Acher, I am someone else. What is he really adding with that particular phrase? So let's first deal with our first question. Our first question is, where did the Rambam get this? So the Kesef Mishnah says that the Rambam learned this from a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. What does the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah say? The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah is a Gemara that talks about a statement of Rabbi Yitzchak. What does Rabbi Yitzchak say? Rabbi Yitzchak makes a statement about four things. Four things he talks about, and some of them are familiar to you. That Mekarin is Adin, Ezra Axelrod, right? They rip up, right? We say, and it's on the basis of the Gemara that we have the tefillah that you'll all be saying on Yom Kippur. We say Rosh Hashanah, the T-Shuva, tefillah, tzedakah, ma'avirin Ezra Axelrod. That it rips up the Gzeira. There's a decree, right? It's saying Mincha, when tomorrow you can say Mincha V'yin Makenu, Krara, to rip up, to tear up the decree. Then the Gemara says that one of the ideas also to rip up the Gzeira is being Mishana Shmo and changing your name. What's the source that the Gemara brings? The Gemara brings is Sarah. Because we know Sarah, as when she was Sarai, she could not have children. And her name was changed, right? The Yud left. And the Hey was added. And Sarah did have children. The Medrash has a similar idea that that changing one's name is also rips up the Gzeira. And it doesn't use Sarah as the Raya. The proof is Avram Avinu. That Avram is the Raya. Where do you see Avram Avinu? Because we know as Avram he didn't have a child, but as Avraham he did have a child. Famous Vayitzel Chutza Tzei Me'atztanim Nishachah. Leave your calculations. The idea of taking leave of whatever was maybe limiting Avram from having a child, he would go ahead now as Avraham and he would be able to have Yitzchak. That's the Gemara. Now, that Gemara, on the basis of it, the Ritva understands that the way it works is we're talking about like Mazel, we're talking about like the astrological calculations, and we're saying that Sarai couldn't have a child, Sarah could. Avram couldn't have a child, Avraham could. The question that everyone asks is that how is that Gemara a Raya for the Rambam? The Rambam's talking about Tshuva. The Rambam's talking about repentance. This is not repentance. This is a different issue. Sarah Yemenu did not have any issues with hate. She didn't have any issues with transgression. So you have to look at the Ran. What does the Ran say? So the Ran comes along. The Ran says that essentially what's going on is the following. When a person changes their name, it causes them to think about things. And the person in changing their name is going to, since the Ran is going to be going low, it's going to cause them to do tshuva. Why? So as many explain this Ran, because a person is going to change their name, they're going to look at themselves and they say, listen, I want to try to achieve something. I know I'm not achieving it where I am right now, so I got to change something. Changing my name, now, by Sarah, by Avram, they didn't have faith, they didn't have any sin, they didn't have any transgression. They weren't speaking Lashon Hara. They weren't doing inappropriate things. So by them, just changing their name was enough. But for me, the only way that I could come to do tshuva is the only way that I'm going to have a different outcome is by doing tshuva. And so says the Ram that changing my name causes me to do tshuva. Now it's an amazing idea that we talk about. And that seems to be, as the Kesef says, the source of the Rambam, that's what Rambam says, that for the derech of the tshuva, it's for a person to go ahead and to change their name. Now, we just to look at two cases that are in the Gemara, where it shows us the power of that change, where a person identifies themselves in one way. So they have a famous case. I actually think we did at one of the years I was here, we did Kedushin. So in Kedushin, I don't know what they're learning this year. You. Okay. So in Kedushin, so we find the following. Many of you have attended a chuppah, you have the chassan, you have the kala, the chassan goes along, he takes the ring, and the rabbi takes out the card, and he reads, Harei at Mikudeshas li the tabazu. That's the standard. Well, what happens if the chassan, the groom, decides, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make it dependent on something. I'm going to make my statement that I'm going to get married to you, but it's on a condition, right? Maybe you can make any condition. So the Gemara says, what if this guy who's getting married, this chassan is a bad guy. This chassan, I know what this chassan has done in his life. This chassan is a Russian. This chassan is someone who just has a bad history, whatever the averos are. And I'm in the wedding, everyone's sitting here, we're watching the chuppah, and all of a sudden you hear the mic, and he says, Harei Mikudeshes al manash shani tzaddik. He says, on the condition that I'm a tzaddik. What would you say? Is the good Kedushin or is not a good Kedushin? How many think it's a good Kedushin? How many think it's the bad Kedushin? Right? Okay? Guess what the Gemara says? It's a good Kedushin. A good Kedushin, what are you crazy? You know this guy? He's like the biggest bum in the world. Shem, here at Tshuva. Maybe there was a thought of Tshuva. This person, though he was a terrible, he has a big list of all the Averos he's done, right there on the spot, standing under the chuppah, he has said, I am going to be a new person. I'm going to be a tzaddik. And because he says that, and because he means it, therefore that Kedushin is a good Kedushin. So that's something, let's say, in the positive, right? We'll talk about, let's say, someone in the negative. So think about the following person. One of the great Rishon that you would label in the Torah, if I asked you, think of who are the various Rishon in the Torah, in the Chamisha Chumshei Torah. My guess is Esav would be on a top list. Esav. When did Esav go bad? What? You said it. When he was born. Maybe even before he was born. Right? And that's the answer that almost everyone would give. When did Esav go bad? So you remember you were in first grade or second grade or third grade. Maybe you would say it's when Rivka was pregnant and he was trying to kill Yaakov. It was Rivka was passing by the Batei Avodah Zarah and he wanted to leave. You would say that Esav was at an earlier point. Much earlier point. Possibly even when Esav was not even born. That's the way that everyone assumes. But there's a Medrash, it's a Medrash Zuta and Shir Ashirim. And the Medrash and Shir Ashirim is really quite a fascinating message. The Medrash says, based on the fact that the Torah talks about, it says the statement, Vayigdalu HaNa'arim. We know they were twins. Vayigdalu HaNa'arim, and these Na'arim grew up. The Medrash states that Yaakov and Esav were basically equals. Yaakov could have been Esav, and Esav could have been Yaakov. And just like the Shem Hashem was Chal on Yaakov, so too the Shem Hashem, the name of God, was also could have fallen and could have been associated with Esav. And he says Esav could have gotten the brachos Rishonos, and Yaakov would have gotten the brachos Achronos. The Yitim L'chal would have gone to Esav, the brachos Avram would have gone to Yaakov. Each one of them, Leah would have gone to Esav, Rachel would have gone to Yaakov. And what the Medrash lines up is that basically Esav was not destined to being a Rasha. It's a different view. A shockingly different view. So you'll say, where did it go bad? We'd say, sometimes everyone's in the play, getting ready for the playoffs. Hopefully the Mets can do it. I don't know. But it says, where did it go bad? So it went bad, as we know, and the Medrash says it, when he sold the Bechorah. But when it says the Bechorah, there it says the line, V'kara also Edom. And the Orach Chaim on V'kara also Edom says the following. He says that, it doesn't say V'kara, it doesn't say that they called him Edom. He called himself Edom. And the idea is that Edom represents Esav in all that's negative about Esav. Esav, until that point, according to the Medrash, had all the opportunities to be as great as Yaakov Avinu. But what happened is that he took himself out of the game. By virtue of the fact is that he labeled himself. He identified himself a certain way. And so we see this tremendous koach, both in terms of the person who says Almanas Shani Tzaddik in a good way, that the Rasha can become a Tzaddik by just changing quickly, and likewise, the potential Tzaddik, the Esav who could have been an Esav, the Esav who could have been a Yaakov, he ends up choosing a life of being Edom. Now this idea of the Rambam of being Mishana Shmo, changing a name, and Kloma Eini Oso Ish, I'm not that person, it's a very powerful idea. It's a very powerful idea. And it's a question that actually, to how we view this particular idea, there are a number of different ways. But one of them, Rabbi Soloveitchik, actually brought out an idea based on a particular minhag that we all do. So many of you, this Erev Yom Kippur, perhaps you're already over Bar Mitzvah, you've been going, there's a minhag brought down in the Shulchan Aruch that a person goes to the mikvah on Erev Yom Kippur. Why? Any reasons why we should go to the mikvah Erev Yom Kippur? I didn't hear it. Clean yourself. That's correct. Well, that's two things. You said clean yourself and clean yourself of your sins. So it happens to be that those are two reasons that are brought down. The Torah brings down the name of the Father Rosh. Then one is Keri, which is the mission that men can have that requires to be purified. Because as it quotes the Pirkei Rebbe Lezer, that we're supposed to be like Malachim. And in being like Malachim, we have to be Nikiyim. That's one reason. But then you say clean yourselves from sin. And clean yourselves from sin is the Indian of Tshuva. That one of the reasons we go ahead and we do mikvah, or that we go to the mikvah, is for Tshuva purposes. And there are actually nafkaminas between the two. Because if you hold it's Keri, it's only men. We don't have a practice of doing this, but the Maharil brings down that Erev Yom Kippur, men would go to the mikvah and women would go to the mikvah. Old people and young people, bar and bas mitzvah, go to the mikvah, Erev Yom Kippur. And that had to be a practice during the times of Maharil. Because it wasn't an issue of Keri, it was an issue of Tshuva. But comes along the Ramah, 2-3 minutes. So, but comes along the Ramah, the Darkei Moshe, and the Darkei Moshe says the following. He says, it might be a play on the Maharil, or it might be his own way of separating things out. And he says is that when a person goes to the mikvah, guess what it is? It's kiger shenisgayer. I'll translate. A ger shenisgayer is like a convert who converts. One of the things that a convert has to do when they join the Jewish people is they have to go to the mikvah and to convert. And what the Rav understands in the Darkei Moshe is that basically this idea of going to the mikvah and being like a convert tells us that Tshuva is an element of a conversion process. Now when you convert, the Gentile who converts, is he any way connected to being his old person? No. The Gemara in Yevamah says, Ger shenisgayer ki katan shenolad dom. He is like a totally new person. And so Mishana Shmo for the Rav means that when you say you're Mishana Shmo, you're changing your name, that means to say you are not the other person. You are no longer connected. You are totally free from it. You're a totally different person. So much so that the Rav brings in a machlokes between, do you have any Kohanim here? Anyone a Kohen? Okay? Shulchan Aruch says, a Kohen who murders. Can a Kohen who murders, b'shogeg or b'mezid, can he go to Duchen? No. So machlokas between Machaber and the Ramah. The Machaber says no. But the Ramah says, so he does, certainly if he does tshuva, he can. And the Ramah is l'shitasa. It's like in the Darkei Moshe, it's kiger shenisgayer. You're a new person. That Kohen, he doesn't have blood on his hands. The whole reason that Kohen can't do the avoda if he's a rotzeach is he has blood on his hands. He has new hands. He has completely new hands. And so one of the ideas, just to conclude, is that when we have the opportunity to do tshuva is very, very powerful because what it does is, it makes it, when you have this level of Mishana Shmo, that whatever I did in the past is totally gone. It's evaporated. And I can now go ahead and engage in doing something in the future completely detached from anything that was before. I wish everyone a Gmach Tzivah Tova and a good job.
Yeah. Aaron, what should we have now?
I don't see it. Hey, how are you? How are you doing? Excellent. Yeah, I'm doing good. It's been a while. A long time. Yeah. So you so good.
L, never done it. Played that in my life. L.
Okay.
I was testing, I was calculating. And it's like,
Girl number 3 was born just about 5 months ago.
Oh, wow.
Pictures.
2030. We came in impressive pictures like crazy.
So that's the first.
So
She
you're
started in high school.
9th grade.
Yep. She's at YCQ in 6th grade.
Okay.
And that's the
Oh, wow. So she really is like, nice. What'd you name your baby?
Her name baby is Becca. She's named after
Oh, my little
Chris
crease.
and Tracer.
So you appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, if he is, that'd be weird.
I would be surprised. Oh, they're using the studio. Oh, concurrent viewers, 0. 0 viewers.
You were doing it before then.
Yeah, it was me. It was me. I said it was you. We were watching it. You're the one view? Yeah.
Guys, out of here.
Guys, we see it.
Oh no, that's just video of it. It's really good quality, actually. I don't really see anything at that.
Seeing that it's research for T-Shuva, and I think everyone is focusing on what we can do to make ourselves better people, closer to the Baruch, engage in T-Shuva. We invited Rabbi Axelrod to come down now. You should understand, as a community role of one of the biggest shuls in the country, there's a lot going on today. I didn't even know. Rabbi, unfortunately, people passed away, started a bar, someone got engaged, maybe a bar mitzvah. So I know his schedule is packed. I know that's something at 12 o'clock. So he's given us a few precious minutes. It's very busy schedule to address us. I heard the first Drasha was beautiful, I have to teach. It's a method how we should look at ourselves, in terms of how we should look at ourselves with the great potential of doing shit. So I have to
Thank you, Eric Freeman, and the wonderful opportunity of coming down and addressing the Talmidim, as well as just that I'm awed by having come to this building. You know, I was a Rabbi around back in the early days of the Brandeis building. So to come in, and I told him, I said, such high ceilings, and I see Rabbi Eliach. Thank you so much. And I know what Rabbi Eliach and Rabbi Friedman, you know, invest into the Talmidim and into the school, and you should just, being that you know, you have this opportunity to be in such your own building. I saw the gym, that's incredible, and everyone should just use this well, and it should be many, many years filled with Torah, so it gets all transplanted to Eretz Yisrael. One of the things I spoke in the earlier group, and we talked about, I introduced the concept based on actually a story. It's a concept that's found in the Rambam. To appreciate the Rambam, to start off with the story. The story was told, it's a true story. It was a group of soldiers that fought for the British Army, that were Jews who were refugees from Germany and from Austria. And they had been in England, they were aliens, and they were not allowed to participate in the war effort. They weren't allowed to have weapons, they weren't allowed to fight. They wanted to, their families had been left in Europe, they heard the terrible things that were happening, and they felt powerless to try and do anything. And then Winston Churchill, together with a few very high intelligence officials, thought, you know what we're going to do? We're going to actually use some of these refugees, and we're going to have them, transition them from being refugees, stateless Jewish refugees, and we're going to turn them into, on the dime, with a lot of effort obviously, into commandos that would actually, they led the charge, they were very involved in Normandy, and many different battles that occurred when the Allies went, and the British Army went to destroy Hitler and his army and the Nazis, Yamach Shema. And it talks about, because of the danger that was presented to them, they were called into a room by their captain, this guy Hilton Jones. And he said, I'm going to give you 15 minutes, because each of you, if you're found as a prisoner, if you're taken as a prisoner as a Jew, you're dead on the spot. There's no going to be any treatment to you as a prisoner of war. I'm going to give you 15 minutes. Imagine, 15 minutes, and each of you has to come up with a different name. Take on a British name. You have to let go of your Jewish past in terms of identifying yourself. And he wasn't doing this to distance them from being Jews. He was trying to save them. And they all go ahead, and that's what they do. They change their names. Now it's very fascinating that the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva, when he talks about what it means from part of the Darchei Tshuva, that a person, the ways that a person goes to do Tshuva, one of the things that he talks about is the need. One of the things that he talks about is basically the need to be Mishana Shmo, to change your name. Klomar, Eino Oso Ish, I'm not that person. Ani Acher, Klomar Ani Acher, as if to say I'm someone else. I'm not that person that did those other deeds. I'm a new individual. That's the Rambam. And the question is, where does the Rambam get this? The Kesef Mishnah brings down, it's a Gemara. Where's the Gemara? The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. Now the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah is not talking about Tshuva. And that's why we're going to have a little question there with the Rambam. But the Gemara talks about, as we know, we're going to be opening up the Aron soon, Yom Kippur. There. Okay, open up the Aron, we say T-Shuva, Tfilo, Tzedakah, Ma'avir, Nesarah, Axelrod. You all know those words Baal Peh. Even though you don't know most of the matzah Baal Peh. But you know those words because those are the words, everyone shouts it out. T-Shuva, Tfilo, Tzedakah. It's going to rip up the Axelrod. We say Avinu Malkeinu, Kra Roa, Rag Zenim. To rip up the decree, whatever that Gzar Din is, whatever that thing that's hanging over us is, totally tear it up. Now, one thing that's listed in the Gemara as a potential possibility, and also in the Medrash, is also changing one's name. For the Kesef Mishnah, this is the raya, this is the proof that you have to be where the Rambam gets it from. But there's a problem in the Rambam, because the Gemara has nothing to do with a concept that changing name dealing with Tshuva. Second of all, if you look at the Gemara's source for this idea of Shina Hashem in terms of ripping up the decree is Sarah Yemenu. that Sarai couldn't have children, but Sarah could have a child. Well, the Medrash says Avram couldn't have a child, Avraham could have a child. That's not involved. Their change of name had nothing to do with Tshuva. So comes along the Ran and Rosh Hashanah, and the Ran says no. Maybe, and the way that the Ran is to be understood, is that yes, with regards to Sarai and Avram, that had to become Sarah and Avraham, there was no tshuva involved with them. But anyone else, the change of name clearly is not going to be enough to undo the decree. And what the change of the name is that a person's going to reflect on their actions. They're going to be introspective. They're going to look at themselves. And when they look at themselves, you know what they're going to say? They're going to say, I'm missing something. I'm lacking something. There's something that I need to fix. And so changing a person's name is going to be an important way that it's going to be a goring low. It's going to cause the person to do tshuva. That is something that can be a source for what the Rambam is saying. Now there is a concept that a person very quickly can make a decision one way or the other, that can change the course of their life, and also can change in terms of how they identify themselves. I'm going to illustrate this with two cases. The first case is from someone who was a Rasha and then becomes a tzaddik. And the second case is a person who could have been a tzaddik and instead became a Rasha. The first case is based on a case in the Gemara. We don't know who this person is. But it's a person that when came time to get married, now you've all been to weddings, and you know that the time at the wedding, the chassan turns to the kala, says, Arei HaMekudeshet B'Tabazu, and that kedushin is the good kedushin. But what if he makes it dependent on something? What if he puts in a condition to his getting married? And we know conditions are important. Because she has to have the das. She has to have the mental awareness for what she's accepted. So if he tells her one thing and the reality is different, that kedushin might not be valid. But what happens if you have a Rasha and he gets married to her, and under the kedushin he says, Almanah shani tzaddik, and you're sitting at the wedding and you know that this guy, he's the worst guy. Do you know what he's done? Do you know what his list of averos are? It's huge, humongous. He's now getting betrothed. How many think that that's a good kedushin? Raise your hand if you think that's a good kedushin. Okay? How many think it's a bad kedushin? The guy's a Russia, he says that outside. Okay, it's like split. Everyone's looking around. So in the last group, almost everyone raised their hand that that's not a good kedushin. Can't be. Can't be. Guess what the Gemara says? It is a good kedushin. Why? That's correct. Because the person maybe had a hero tshuva. He might have had a thought that even though he was such a bad person, even though he had led a life up until that point he was a Rasha, now he's saying he's a tzaddik, that kedushin might be very good. And the kedushin is good because we assume that he did have that thought of tshuva. So that's an example of someone very quickly was a Rasha and then becomes a tzaddik. Let's talk the other side. A person who's a tzaddik, or potentially a tzaddik, and then becomes a Rasha. And that model, believe it or not, is Esav. Now most people, when they think about Esav, this is a radical medrash. Because most people, when people think about Esav, they think about Esav, that Esav was a Rasha from the very beginning. I'm sure if I asked you, prove that Esav was a Rasha from the very beginning, you would say, oh, I know the story, I remember the stories. She was pregnant, Rivka was pregnant with both. She passed base Avodah Zarah, and she'd feel Esav want to go out. And they talk about Esav wanting to kill Yaakov inside. They talk about, the Medrash talks about how Rivka couldn't have any more children because the Medrash says that when Esau was born, he damaged his mother that she could no longer have any other children. So that all is the view, and there is that view, and it's the dominant view, that Esau was bad almost from the start. But the Medrash in Shir HaShirim, there's a Medrash that says, Vayigdalu HaNa'arim, that the Na'arim grew up. And the Medrash says, while it seems to be, based on what we know from the other Ma'amar Chazal, statements of Chazal about Esau, it's like radical. It says, just like the Shem Hashem was Chal on Yaakov, the name of God could have been on Esau. Just like Yaakov, with Esau was supposed to have the Malachim, the kings, and Yaakov was going to have the Kohanim, was going to have the priests. Esau was going to have Leah and Zilpah. Yaakov was going to have Bilhah and Rachel. And everything was going to be lined up. And the Medrash goes ahead and says, Yaakov could have been Esau, and Esau could have been Yaakov. Wild. Vayigdalu Na'arim. They grew up literally identical twins. In a literal way. Everything that could have been Yaakov could have potentially been Esau. That idea. And yet, somehow, he messed up. Somehow that wasn't the case. And the question is, where did it go wrong? If it didn't happen there, where did it go wrong? So Vayigdalu Na'arim is after this, they grew up. And then the incident with the adashim, with the lentils, with the soup. And the Orach Chaim says, on the pasuk it says, the Karo Edom. He was called Edom. The Esau himself called himself Edom. Edom as a name is the name of Esau that represents Esau as the bad dude. Esau as the Russia. Esau as a nation that brings forth Amalek, that seeks to destroy the Jewish people. The exile, the Golos that we're in after the destruction of Beis HaMikdash, it's Golos Edom. Esau represented as a nation that is antithetical to Yisrael is Edom. And Esau called himself Edom. Sometimes, this is very important, sometimes we end up identifying ourselves in a certain way. And we get locked into that. Because it's something that we just think about in terms of how we view ourselves. And if a person views themselves in a certain way, it can be very powerful. And it can be powerful to transform a person from a Rasha to a tzaddik, but equally, it could also turn a person, right? You're in high school. And let's just say, on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur, you're in shul. And you're saying to yourself, you know what, I could maybe, we're going to be sitting there in 3 days, you're going to be clapping the whole time. And it's a huge list. But maybe you'll be saying to yourself, there's one area, I'll pick an area. You guys are already getting older. Kibbut of Aim, right? You're going to be clapping Zilzal Harim Amorim, your parents. And you realize in yourself, how do I talk to my parents? How do I talk to my parents? Do I speak to them in a way that reflects tremendous kavod, tremendous respect, right? Or do I speak in a different way, right? Lacking kavod, raising my voice, talking to them like if they don't bring me to my friend exactly when I need to be brought up, if I don't have the car exactly when I needed it, you lose it. A person sometimes think, but I'm not capable of anything better. I can't do anything better. Whatever that midah is, whatever that avera is. And what tshuva is all about, and that's what the Rambam is really telling us, is that Mishana Shmo is I have a capability and I have a capacity to change. And when I do that change, the Rav develops this idea is that a person who's Mishana Shmo Klomar Ani Ocher is someone who's basically going through a level of gerus. It's like a ger sheniskayer. It's a convert. Because what is a convert? What is a convert? A Gentile, right? Someone who was a Gentile and now becomes a Jew, right? A Gentile is a non-Jew, right? A non-Jew, right? A non-Jew. We call a guy, right? Even think about it. I'm going to give some extra chomer. The Magen Avraham says, does a convert say Shalom Sani Goy in the morning?
Yeah.
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 And it never
But
says
it's
Shalom Sani.
because they're not a guy anymore. They've gone through a transition. They're no longer associated with being a guy, with being a Gentile, because they have totally transformed themselves. And in a similar way, that is what you have. In a similar way, that's what you have with this whole tshuva process. There's a machlokas in the Gemara, in the Shulchan Aruch, concerning a Kohen who murders. Even if he does tshuva, can he duchen? Right? Can he be involved in duchening? So what do you think? How many think a Kohen who was a murderer can duchen? Well, you have to know what the variables.
Depends if
Okay?
it's
It happens to be, it's based on a pasuk in Yeshaya. And the pasuk in Yeshaya talks negatively about those who they can't serve if their hands are filled with blood. The Mechaber says that even if he does tshuva, he cannot do it. Why? Because the simple understanding is his hands have this stain. His hands have this stain of blood. The Ramah comes along, and the Ramah says he can do it if he does tshuva. And the idea is because, believe it or not, this person who, let's say, whether he murdered on purpose or by mistake, the shogeg, when he does tshuva, what the Ramah understands for tshuva is like kigersh and iskaya. Those hands are now different hands. Those hands are no longer the hands that committed that they no longer have that stain. And that's a tremendous, powerful idea about tshuva, that what tshuva allows us to participate in and to take advantage of is the ability to start new. That a person can make a determination that they're going to go on with life, and they're going to go on as if what happened in the past has nothing to do with me. That's what the Rambam is saying. Eino oso ish. I am not the person who did those things. And that could be a very powerful way for people when they're dealing with tshuva, regardless of what they've done, to be able to start moving forward. One of the concepts is actually a story shared yesterday. It's a story with Baruch Ber Leibowitz. Baruch Ber was one of the great Gedolim at times of World War I. And he went to Vilna after the war with his family, because a lot of the yeshivas his yeshiva was in Vilna. He went to join up with the yeshiva. And he came, and he was with his father, who was very sick, Baruch Leibowitz. Came with his father. Baruch Ber's father was sick. And he stayed with him in the hospital day in and day out, day in and day out. And then one night, he wasn't there. They convinced him that he needed to take a break, whatever, and he wasn't at the hospital. And he came, and then the father passed away. And he felt so responsible. He felt guilty, in a way, over the fact that he wasn't there. He was distraught. He was completely distraught. So much so that he could not give shir. Could not give shir. He was overwhelmed by the guilt that he had. He meets, at the time, the Chavetz Chaim was in Vilna, and he meets with the Chavetz Chaim. And the Chavetz Chaim obviously understood what was going on. He shared what was going on. And the Chavetz Chaim went over 10 times for half an hour, spelling out to Baruch Ber that what tshuva is about is not just about kapara, it's not just about atonement, but it's about this idea of renewal. It's about the idea of being mechadesh, of starting over, of recreating, of severing the link with the past. And when Baruch Ber heard this, and it gave him consolation over the fact that certainly he should not feel guilty, and he should be able to move on by knowing that he did the best that he could, there was this situation, and even if he feels that he fell short, in doing tshuva, he needs to be able to move on. That is what Shinoi Hashem, that is what the changing of a name is really all about. In the Yesod HaTshuva of Rabbeinu Yonah, so when he talks about this particular idea, he talks about the idea of a person understanding like there are Beria Chadasha. It's not the Kegesh in the sky, but it's something similar. That a Beria Chadasha, one of the reasons we wash Netilas Yadayim in the morning is why? Is Beria Chadasha. It's because you're like a new creation. Because each and every day, a person has an opportunity. Think about that. You wash Netilas Yadayim. It's funny I said Netilas Yadayim. When I was in Rambam, I was a base Medrash Rebbe. I'm veering off here, because I said Netilas Yadayim. I was a base Medrash Rebbe. I started off as a base Medrash Rebbe. And all my guys, I said, were to go 5 for 5. 5 things they needed to do every morning before they came. I said, you should do it. And one of the 5 for 5 was to be makbid Netilas Yadayim with the brother, Asher Kedishon L'Sozes Ranu Am Netilas Yadayim. Baruch Hashem, all those guys who were 5 for 5, they're doing great. Am Netilas Yadayim. Now, I don't know how many of you in the morning, you don't have to tell me, back it was 1995, it wasn't so great how many were 5 for 5. But Asher Kedishon every morning, Asher Kedishon says, Am Netilas Yadayim. Wash Negel Asa and make a bracha. And with that bracha, what are you supposed to be thinking? So one of the ideas that a person has to be thinking is that I am a new creation. You know what that means? You know what that means? It means that it's Aseres Mechuvah. And whatever I did the day before is the day before. Today is a new day. Today is a new start. And what happened yesterday, whether I spoke Lashon Hara, whether I saw something on my phone I wasn't supposed to, whether I texted someone what someone else did and I painted them in a bad picture, and I wasn't helpful in promoting their reputation, I was destroying their reputation. Whatever the issue is, that was yesterday. Today I'm going to wash Netilas Yadayim, and I'm going to think that part of this washing is that I'm a new person. I'm what's called a Beria Chadasha. That's a very powerful idea with tshuva, because that's what tshuva really is all about. Tshuva is all about starting fresh and starting new. That's why there's a famous question. Right? There's a famous question. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. One second, let me get this straight. Rosh Hashanah is Yom Adin. I'm going to be alive, right? Chaim Yibales. That's Rosh Hashanah. Yom Kippur, I'm sitting here, I'm taking care of all my problems. All the al-chetz, all the chatam, ki b'yom hazeh yechaper alechem l'tar eschem. Should reverse the order. We should do Yom Kippur first, and then have the Yom Adin. You want to weigh me out? We talk about the scales, the Rambam, the scales of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Adin. We should first go ahead and take care of Yom Kippur, have Yom Kippur, say Ma'al Chetz, go say, everyone's going to be running every Yom Kippur, I'm sorry. Right? You should do it before Rosh Hashanah, not before Yom Kippur. It should be, the order should be reversed. So what's the idea? The idea is because Rosh Hashanah is not about the past. Rosh Hashanah is not about the Chet. That's Yom Kippur, and we do have a day of Yom Kippur. But Rosh Hashanah is all about where I am now. Where am I today? What am I ready to commit to today? Do I want to be different? Do I want to at least explore the possibility of changing? And each person in themselves understands and knows, and that's what sense is. And as you get older, you become more mature. I to be honest with you, I know it's on video, I don't want to cut the video. This is a totally different presentation than 9th and 10th grade. Totally different. Most of you stay in the room. 9th and 10th, they were all fidgeting. Why? Because you're already understanding that life is complicated. You know life is challenging. You have more of an awareness to yourselves, and that's good. And that needs to continue. And with that comes to understand the opportunity for tshuva. The opportunity that a person can say whatever it is. It might be in the area of how you speak to your parents. It might be in the areas to, am I washing Netilas Yadayim in the morning and making the bracha of Asher Kedeshanu. And it might be in all the other areas of Benadum Makom and Benadum Chaver. A person has the opportunity to change. And so I just want to conclude with a story. The story is that there was, it took place in the, basically over the 1920s and 30s and 40s. There was a man, and his name was Dr. Sam Schultz. Dr. Sam Schultz was not observant, he wasn't from, he went to MIT, he became a physician, and he was very involved in helping Jewish causes. He worked for what's called the JDC, the Joint Distribution Committee, which is still active. They got very active in Ukraine in terms of helping out Ukrainian Jewish refugees at all the different border points. And one of the things that he did was he published a paper in Cincinnati. He was living in Cincinnati at the time, and he published a paper. And in the paper, he would write about all the different things happening to the Jewish community, both locally and globally. And there was a Rav, a famous Rav who lived in Cincinnati. His name was Rabbi Silva. Rabbi Silva, he was basically one of the main Rabbanim, leading all the Rabbanim of America and Canada. Rabbi Silva once saw an article that he wrote, and in the article he was describing what was going on to the yeshivas in Europe in pre-World War II, and the difficulties that they were having. And Rabbi Silva knew that this Sam Schultz, again, not a frum person, but he had been involved. He was in Israel and working in the yeshuv in Israel and trying to help out in different things. And he tapped him to be involved in the Vad Hatzalah. Vad Hatzalah was the organized effort, pretty much of the Haredi community in America, to try and help out European Jewry pre-war and during the war, to do the best that they could. They didn't have a lot, and there weren't a lot of people ready to help them. And then Reb Silver implored him, if you could go to Europe and head up our efforts on behalf of the yeshivas in Europe. He goes to Europe. He leaves his family, leaves Cincinnati. He goes to Europe, and he goes and he's conducting meetings with Reb Chaim Ozer Gudzinski. Reb Chaim Ozer was literally the Gadol Ador of pre-World War II Europe. And he's dealing with Reb Chaim, and they're talking about things, and they have meetings. And then there's one meeting where Reb Chaim turns to him, and he says to him, I want to address you no longer as Dr. Sam Schultz, but I want to call you Reb Shmuel. And he calls him Reb Shmuel. Now, this Sam, he's not a Red, and he certainly doesn't feel comfortable with that title. And he turns to Reb Chaim and he expresses the discomfort in that title. Reb Chaim says, you left your whole family to come to Europe. You're being Moseh Nefesh, putting your life in danger, coming here to save Klal Yisrael. He says, you're entitled to that title, Reb Shmuel. This Sam Schultz wrote, it's recorded, and he said the next day he put on talis and tefillin for the first time. He went from Dr. Sam to Reb Shmuel in one conversation that he had with Reb Chaim Ozer, because Reb Chaim Ozer opened the door for him to think about, to shift his thinking. It can be very quick. It can be one determination. There are lots of things to think about. I don't want to overwhelm. I identified two in particular that are pretty. One is hard, how you talk to your parents. One is pretty simple, how you get up in the morning to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom. But if you take either one of those, and guess what I think? If you even just start with Al Netilas Yadayim, and you realize that every day you're a new creation, and that Hashem is giving you the gift of life to live another day, to have a wonderful opportunity, you'll also end up talking nicely to your parents, and all your mitzvahs will be different because you have a different viewpoint in how you're living your lives. Wish you all a Maxima Tova. Thank you so much. You guys are great.
This whole setup is to record it so that we can